Good evening, everyone. Everything, all the sound working okay? Okay. There we go. Good evening, everyone. It is the final evening of IndiE3, and we are coming to, like, a denouement. Is that how you say that word? I think so. We just hit some amazing panels, just rapid fire one after the other, and I'm so glad that we got to host those amazing talks. We just digested Metal Gear Solid 4, and listening to that was just amazing, absolutely amazing. Some just brilliant thought and digestion on a single game, so focused and so wonderful. Everyone else has had a chance to talk about games and critical gaming and what it means to be critical about their gaming in a lot of different ways, except for me. And I get to have a time now to do that with the amazing and incomparable KirbyKid. We have one more interview of the day of the IndiE3, and it is of a writer, a game designer, someone who's just been everywhere and done everything. And has so many credits to his name as a player, as a designer, as a writer and a critic, and I'm just so happy to be able to have a chance to talk with him, and we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna rock it out for the end of the evening, and then after that at 8 p.m. we will have the very final indie game showcase, where I've got 36 games on my list. And we are going to do all of them. Those are all publicly listed, and those are the 36 that I really want to get to before we can close IndiE3. There have been so many amazing submissions, and we can talk about that later. I don't want to go any further. Without further ado, essentially, I bring you KirbyKid, Richard Terrell.
Welcome to IndiE3.
Hello, KirbyKid.
Hey, what's up?
What's up with you? Have you been having a good day?
Yeah, it's been a crazy day, just kind of packed with lots of things, but it's good to be settling down to a good discussion in the evening.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm honored to be able to have you on the show. You've done so many really cool things.
Thanks.
So most recently, you have been the designer of Barabari Ball.
Yeah, the concept got started by a guy named Noah Sasso up in New York. My brother and I joined the project about a year and a half ago, so we've been working on it since then and really just putting a lot of work and energy into making it as cool as possible. So we're really psyched that it finally got its release on Sports Friends, on PSN, and PS4.
Mm-hmm.
Been kind of crazy.
We have some video footage of it right here too. For anyone who hasn't seen Barabari Ball, it's a beautiful game. And
Yeah.
do you want to describe just very briefly elevator pitch about what's going on in this game?
Yeah, in a nutshell, it's like Super Smash Brothers plus soccer. So you're jumping around, fighting and kicking, but the main objective is to knock ball into one side of the field that's your colored side to score points. So in a lot of ways, it can play like a sport game if that's what you're more familiar with, but in other ways, it plays like a fighting game.
It's a beautiful game and has been I've been able to play it often and with a lot of different people, and it's always a blast because it's very simple and very responsive, especially as a sports game and as a fighting game. So I want to know, I guess, just specifically about Barabari Ball. You've talked about Smash Brothers, and you've talked about sports games as it relates to basketball, as you are kind of shooting a ball into a hoop of sorts, a very big hoop. But what specifically were you trying to evoke from both of those inspirations?
Yeah, so being inspired by a lot of different types of fighting styles and basically martial arts films. So you see stuff like Jackie Chan, and he's just sort of a super master of all these different fighting styles in real life, and he sort of exhibits that in his film work. So there are lots of scenes you see where I think one was in Rush Hour, where he was trying to protect like a priceless vase from being knocked over by the enemies. So he was constantly setting them up like upright, and they would constantly be bumping into him, and he would like set them upright and like try to fight them at the same time. And I thought that was like super neat. Like I think there's a lot of ways to take sort of a common action that you see nowadays in video games, like whether it's a shooter or a fighter or whatever, and just sort of make that gameplay happen, but in a very different way that makes it a lot more sort of fresh and appealing to different people. So with Ball, just putting a ball in the field and having the players fight over that instead of directly at each other for the most part, it just really changes the feel of a fighting game. It makes certain things in fighting gameplay more apparent because it's really easy to see who has the advantage and disadvantage when that ball is flying through the air. And that can help get a lot of people's foot in the door in terms of enjoying these types of games.
I absolutely agree that it's such a transparent game about what is happening at any given time.
And I guess one of the cool things to note is you have 7 jumps, and that's sort of atypical for Smash Brothers and a lot of others, to even platformer games. And we want you to jump and fly around a lot and not feel like you're like too limited and stuck on the ground. And the jumps are indicated by those dots around the character, so you can easily see how many jumps you have and how many jumps your opponent has, and then from there it's just sort of how you're going to dance in midair to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of communication going on that's actually very transparent between you and your opponent as a player of the game. And so it's not like either person is necessarily hiding anything that they're about to do.
Yeah.
But it's just communicating and trying to find an opening or an advantage of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of games have lots of high-level stuff, high skill ceilings, and a lot of stuff to dig into for players. But a lot of times that high-level stuff doesn't easily translate on the screen. So sometimes a flash of something happens, and then the commentators are like, "Oh, that was crazy!" And you're sitting there looking left and right, trying to figure out who's going to explain what just happened to you. And even when they explain it, you just don't get it, right? Like, oh, if he had just timed that one frame later, that would have, and you're still sitting there going, I don't understand what happened. So, like, even though that exists for a lot of other games, for Ball, like, when you charge up your ball throw or your attacks, your character starts flashing and glowing, and that's obvious. And the power that you put into the ball is obvious because it sort of travels in an arc, and you can see the forces being enacted on the ball. When you have fewer jumps, you can see that and how that affects you and your opponent. So that's very true.
So I want to talk about Smash Brothers because there's huge influence here, and you obviously go by the moniker KirbyKid.
Yeah.
And so I want to hear a little bit about the history on that and share that with people, where you come from in Smash Brothers scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I got into Smash just playing with my brother from day one with Smash 64, and we've always been sort of like a team and fighting computers and stuff, and we were really young back then, like 12 and 14, so we didn't really have a lot of people to play with, and we kind of moved soon after that. So ever since then, we've just been playing Smash with ourselves, and even when the Melee came out, we played it with our friends, but things really didn't start picking up until we met a crew of sort of older guys that were sort of the founding fathers of the competitive Smash scene that exists today, right? So we were down in Texas, doing road trips, just visiting people and showing them not only how cool the game was, but why it was more fun to get into groups and play with each other and take that 40-minute, an hour and a half road trip every weekend to just see each other and have fun playing this game. And from there, everything that you currently know about competitive Smash sort of grew from that. And I've been playing Smash ever since, including Brawl, and just got back from doing the Best Buy early look at Super Smash Bros. For Wii U.
Excellent.
So that was a lot of fun.
There's a lot of love here in Ball.
Definitely.
I mean, all the way down to the multiple jumps. You are essentially playing as Kirby.
Yeah, everybody's a Kirby in Ball. Yeah. And my name sort of comes from my main Kirby in Smash 64 and Melee, and sort of Kirby was really bad at Melee, so I stuck it out anyway and just put a lot of work into him and became sort of the best Kirby player in the world. And that's why I sort of stick with the name nowadays.
That also see, that story actually relates a lot to me as well, and my relationship with Barabari Ball coming as I used to play Smash Brothers growing up long ago, and my main was Jigglypuff.
Yeah.
And so I just felt so much connection with this game, where I was like, there's finally a fighting game that represents everything about how I felt playing as Jigglypuff, and all of the fun that I had in Super Smash Bros. Melee and the original, and even into Brawl, playing as Jigglypuff.
Yeah.
And so, like, the most important thing is, like, this is so contemporary, this is so in the now, that people that are our age, that have the power, the tools, the ability to create games themselves at a certain level, are coming from having played games like Super Smash Bros. And having come from playing games on the N64, on the Dreamcast, on the PlayStation 1, and this is reflective of the kinds of games that are coming out now.
That's very true, yeah. I think my brother asked before, like, why don't you see more Smash Brothers clones in the industry? But I think it's because the people who really grew up and loved Smash Brothers weren't old enough a couple of years ago, but now you're starting to see projects popping up here and there that are really Smash Brothers inspired, and soon the devs will get older and more money and more powerful. Then we'll take over the world.
Yep, absolutely. So that's Barabari Ball, and that's just one project that you've worked on, and that's a part of the Sports Friends bundle, which is actually something that we'll be showing later on in the Indie Showcase, which I'm very excited to talk a little bit about. I'm really glad that was submitted. But you've also done a lot of critical work with the Starseed Observatory. And I want you to explain in your own words what Starseed Observatory is about, because I don't think I could necessarily do it justice with you here.
So, in a nutshell, I think the Starseed Observatory it's my attempt and a group that our team that we really sort of formed as with mutual respect for games criticism and video games, and slowly over the years we assembled a small team of people who like to play games and think about them critically and have really good discussions. And from that group and that teamwork, that synergy, Starseed Observatory is a website that is an example of what we think is the next generation of games criticism. And what that really means to most people is a tool for enjoying a video game to its fullest, no matter what type of player you are, like whether you hate the game, love the game, or somewhere in between. We believe that games criticism is there for you regardless of where you come to a game at that point. So it gives you the tools to better understand what's in the game, as far as just listing things, really providing diagrams and examples of what's in there, like sort of objectively. It provides what other people think about the game, so like gameplay analysis, like user experiences, quotes from all across the board about all these different aspects. Anybody who's had a voice on the game, their quotes can be represented on what we call the wall of quotes. So that's supposed to be like a very unbiased way of just seeing what people are saying about it in a very organized way, so you can enjoy that and dig deeper. And then it has this other layer to it where traditionally games criticism is people talking about games and perhaps writing something, doing a video, making a diagram. But the last sort of wrinkle for the Starseed Observatory is we worked with the game developer to take some of the criticisms that we had and actually develop a product, a playable product that is reflective of the things we uncovered, right? So if we thought something was weird, unfair, could be better, or could be interesting to explore in another way, we talked with Droken about it, and he started working on this project to put it back into the game, and it's supposed to sort of kickstart that whole criticism process all over again, and just really give you the best possible platform and source for understanding the game and enjoying it as much as possible.
It's absolutely an amazing artifact, and I think that what you're doing here is so different from what a lot of people are capable of doing with critique, especially because in what is basically a consumerist or even a capitalist society, we, as critics, need to always have a critical analysis of the newest or biggest game
Yeah.
in order to be heard. That's just survival. But Starseed Observatory goes a completely different angle. You have a bunch of people who are so passionate about a single work and a single expression that they also want to use that to reflect their own ideas. And the Starseed Observatory is just such an amazing testament to what we can do when we concentrate our efforts onto a single game, especially one that's as important and valuable and just dang cool as Starseed Pilgrim.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess to just start as a question, I guess the main question would be, why of all things Starseed Pilgrim?
Yeah, I've gotten that question a lot since starting the project, and
Well, I mean, it's such a fresh idea, and I'd love to apply this to so many other games as well. And it makes Starseed Observatory, or it makes Starseed Pilgrim seem like the perfect bed to have this in. It just seems so perfect, and I think that's why I want to ask how you guys came up with Pilgrim.
So in our group, we have a bunch of different sort of tastes. Like some guys lean on strategy games, some people lean towards platformers and fighting games, and etc. So we knew we wanted to do a project on one game, but we couldn't quite settle on it naturally. And then all of a sudden, the Starseed Pilgrim kind of fell into our laps. We were having our sort of weekly meetings where we used Google Hangout and just talk about game design and critique. And then one of the meetings, one of our members said, Droken's going to stop by, the creator of Starseed Pilgrim. And I was like, he is? Then I should buy it and play it. And then the next guy's like, I guess I'll buy it too. And then all of a sudden we all had copies and we had all played it and all had one game that we had a shared experience with. And from there we just decided, hey, since we've all played this one, let's continue working with it. And it turns out it was a perfect game for taking on that project. It has sort of a little bit of a mystique about it. There's something mysterious about it, which is great when you're a group that believes that clearly talking about games helps us better enjoy and understand it. You can really address things like what makes this game mysterious, or why are people talking about it in hushed voices as part of your focus. It was part of right when we launched the observatory, it was part of the Humble Bundle, so it got that game into the hands of thousands, hundreds of thousands of more players
that's
that otherwise, yeah, so that was like a bump in activity and people were Googling Starseed Pilgrim, so that was kind of super convenient. And just like being able to talk with Droken and meet with him up in New York and GDC was just really cool. So it all just kind of came together, and I couldn't have asked for like a better game for that project.
It is a game that is very different in how it takes a kind of block puzzle idea and puts a lot more layers onto it, and it's been very, I don't know what the right word is, but very valued for its all of the nuance that's involved in it, and it ends up just kind of being like this perfect bed for game studies, for studying where we can go with games because it's so interpretive.
Yeah, I love how abstract it is. I love how minimal it is in a lot of ways. I love that it has a gameplay focus, because oftentimes I think with a lot of games criticism, people will use narrative and story elements to be the core of their analysis. So we kind of picked a game that didn't have much or any of that, and we said, how much can we sort of illuminate about this game and what it's like to play this game, just tackling the gameplay part. And I think that was the part that's most difficult for people and why we wanted to zero in on it.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about Starseed Pilgrim and the Starseed Observatory and the kind of tandem they have is that now this can become a point of departure for a point of beginning for game studies groups. For game studies groups all over anywhere, so they can have the game, and in a classroom you can use Starseed Pilgrim as a shared experience of everyone, and then the Starseed Observatory as this artifact of what people are talking about when they're talking about this game, and get students inspired. That's at least the way that I've seen it used, is as a classroom resource, and I think that's a really amazing thing to be able to do with a game and with a little bit of community effort around a single title. And I don't know, have you seen anything like that coming out of the education spaces?
Using sort of the critical texts that rise up around the game as a good foundation for launching these sort of smaller study efforts from academics or from school programs. I can't say that I'm thinking of any of that off the top of my head. I think a few things have been done with Portal, but they weren't using a particular text to drive that classroom curriculum. Mm-hmm. I've heard of a few other classes centered around game studies in a few particular games, but they weren't like pairing it up with a particular text. I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Well, then the academics need to get to work then, because this is so easy. Starseed Observatory just makes it so easy. Also because they're cheap and accessible, as opposed to like when you're teaching a class, something to take in mind is how much do these games cost, and how much can we afford our students to take costs on their own when a game studies class is already such a rare being or thing. Mm-hmm. So those are definitely things that I think about when I'm looking at Starseed Pilgrim and the stuff that I've been able to be a part of in classrooms, because I know that my mentor at the University of Washington has also used this as part of a stepping point for students to get into writing and get into critique, because it's just so accessible and so like quick to understand, and just really wonderful that you guys were able to put this together.
Yeah, thanks. It was the hard work of about half a year of hard work that went into that website.
Is there anywhere else that this is going? Is it going to any other games, or are you working on Starseed Observatory more at all?
Yeah, we originally planned to like, one of the core ideas with the Starseed Observatory is, I think one thing that people are afraid of with games criticism is sort of being told that what they think and feel are somehow not real and invalidated because other people sort of did quote unquote research and they can tell them what's up. And I think good games, or good criticism in general, does a great job of creating sort of a map where people can really get their bearings on what they experienced, what they might experience, and all the other sort of headspaces they can explore. Mm-hmm. So with the observatory, we wanted to design this website where it houses the best games criticism centered around this one game, but it doesn't close the door to conversation. And if the best criticism is already something that exists for a particular topic or subtopic, we want to pull that in and include it on the site. So we're not obsessed with having it come from us. We just want it to be properly arranged and highlighted so that anyone else can use it. Wow. So with that idea in mind, we just saw a lot of what we put into the website in terms of what we wrote as a starting place, and we wanted other people to, if they had a problem with it or liked it, like develop counter critiques, and we would put their counter content right up next to the main content, because we don't want to somehow come across as saying, since we have the keys, we tell you what's up and we control the message. Like, we want everyone that says anything to be accessible in that way. And we had planned for the website to have this sort of second major update. Uh-huh. So all those counter critiques and stuff would be updated all at once and sort of get some attention about it. And we'd also launch with that modification of Starseed Pilgrim that Droken was working on. But for one reason or another, that mod is still being worked on. It's delayed, as most games are, and we didn't get a lot of active comments in response in terms of what we wrote on the website. So there's not any kind of critiques to put up. So that sort of puts an end chapter on that whole Starseed Up project. But we definitely had that infrastructure in place in case that happened. And I think for a more popular game, you might expect more of that content.
Sure.
That'd be cool.
What about, so one of the things is that you're curating all of this discourse and critique on online and about an online game. And what do you think about the permanence of online resources for critique? I mean, is this something that's going to be around for a long time, or is the, because I'm thinking of like the last 10 years or so of fantastic game critique, and how eventually a lot of great critique ends up dissolving over the course of just time, just internet time. Austin C. Howe, who's been on really all day today, is working on a book for Final Fantasy VII, because he was trying to find Final Fantasy VII critique, and he ended up with a bunch of dead links. And so he's like, hold up, if all this stuff's getting dissolved, I need to like write something quick about this stuff so that it isn't lost forever.
Yeah, preserving websites, preserving digital works and digital art, and by extension, preserving the critique made digitally about these digital things is sort of a strange and mysterious space. I think there's a lot of people that value these things and do great things, great effort to preserve them. And I think it definitely needs to be on somebody's hard drive somewhere. We can't let the internet swallow up all this content. I think for a website like Starseed Observatory, if for that game in particular, for other games in case the project expands, having a great go-to place for all the content or all the related content you can find, and then sort of wrapping that up all in one PDF or whatever would be a great way to preserve some of that. Because it'd be cool if no matter who you are or when you wrote it, if you are writing in this topic, you submit it like a link or whatever, and at some point it's the curator's job to at least make a copy of it, and that'd be one way to have one central source for a game like Starseed Pilgrim and one go-to place that can be preserved fairly easily because it has a connection to everything else. Other than that, I'm at a loss at what to do about that issue.
It's a weird issue to have, and there's so many people involved and so much work there that it's not that it's something that'll need to be fixed anytime soon. But it's such an interesting beast to tackle, especially when coming up with if there's going to be more observatories of anything else or similar styled like that. The infrastructure that you have at Starseed Pilgrim is just amazing and can be set up and applied anywhere in a lot of different ways. Maybe even in a larger scale project like a wiki for critical gaming, essentially. But yeah, there's just so much cool stuff in there. So what have you been up to lately? Because these have been all previous projects. Have you been up to anything else in critical gaming or looking at specific games at all?
Yeah, one thing that we learned from the Observatory project is that you can't take 6 months to build a website. It's not gonna fly really for the next time you do it. It's great for the first effort to take that long to get things going, but now we're looking for ways to generate similar kinds of websites and content much more quickly, whether that's tackling simpler games, like less complex games, or whether that's tackling them earlier in their sort of life cycle. That's what we're looking at, and making sort of less dense websites. And the plan that we're sort of formulating at this time is sort of a way to do the same Starseed Observatory treatment on a smaller scale, but for local multiplayer indie games. And yeah, because that's sort of the year of local multiplayer indie about now, and we've had some great games pop up. Towerfall, of course, games like Samurai Gun, Needhog. These games are very popular, and throw Sports Friends in there as well. Even though I represent Bar Volleyball, that game is also made up of 3 games that I had nothing to do with, so I have no qualms about throwing that into the mix. But for multiplayer indie games in particular, there's a lot of hurdles that exist in terms of trying to create the best environment to enjoy what these things are. And unlike single player games and story games where people often can consume them at their own on their own timeline, on their own schedule, and join the conversation whenever or talk to their friends about it, multiplayer games require people, and local multiplayer games require people in your same room and in your same area, and it requires controllers and all these issues sort of, and like competition is rough no matter how you slice it, even when it's all for fun. It just creates a different kind of atmosphere. So there's a whole bunch of hurdles that local multiplayer indie games have to overcome, and I think one way to both expose and highlight what's so great about these game experiences is to sort of unite the efforts with games criticism, right? And not only you use games criticism as a way of saying addressing people in terms that they can understand and giving them the voice in order to ask better questions, right? Showing them what your communities are like and what's valuable about it, and then they can just make better and better informed decisions about whether they want to peek in, take a look, try it themselves, start a community on their own, like all that stuff. So I think the next step that we're working on is local multiplayer indie games criticism, getting the devs involved, and trying to make something new happen all around that.
Wow, that's a huge project. So how do you go about curating a local multiplayer experience?
Yeah, so it turns out, like I said before, everybody knows or should know that Smash Brothers is a huge game, and competitive Smash has a really devoted and just crazy energetic fan base.
Yes.
But they don't know where that came from or how it got started, right? The actual community part. But like I was saying before, being like in the grassroots effort to build a competitive Melee scene back when it was nothing, taught me a lot about the kinds of values and environments and spaces you have to foster in order to build a community that understands the same things, that reflects the same ideals, and like expands with that idea in mind. So I have experience. It's a short way of saying I have experience, and I'm going to try to leverage as much of that as possible in order to shine some light on these indies, right?
Yeah. Is there, I'm wondering about the implementation, just like recording people playing together, or
so I have a couple of
interviews, or
I have a couple of cool ideas. Some involve just a standard heat map kind of idea. People, I've looked at the discourse surrounding Sports Friends because I'm directly related in that project, but I've also had my ear to the ground on a lot of what people are saying with local multiplayer indie games. And people say, I'm really interested in this game. I, number one, don't have friends. Number two, don't have controllers. Like, nobody wants to drive to where I am. Like, all these sort of major issues because they're holding things up, but minor in terms of these are the same kinds of things we all had to overcome when building the Smash scene. So one way of helping people understand the potential of what can happen when they put in a little bit of effort is showing them a heat map. Imagine a Google map type thing where if you're interested in one of these indie games, you could just put a pin on the map, and without committing to any public meeting, without committing to a party RSVPing or anything like that, you can just get a sense of the players that are in your area that are interested in playing this game, and that may be enough to generate some interest, and local efforts can be pulled together and organized from there. But I think that's a really basic step that's missing from a lot of ways people talk about local things. Like, keep it local and get a sense of the actual space by putting it on a map.
Wow, that sounds like you're planning on a local social network for competitive multiplayer games.
And I think one of the focuses is that even if you're not sort of a competitive person, quote unquote, and you're not looking to practice, you're not looking to go to tournaments and win, there's a lot of interesting things that you can find out about the game itself or yourself by digging a little deeper and putting a little bit more effort. And I think that would be one of the best uses of games criticism in this case, just to really dispel a lot of assumptions that people have by default, when they think a competitive game, going to a place to compete, what could that how much fun could that possibly be for me, who typically doesn't engage in any of that? And just sort of showing them what's possible, changing their minds or something like that, that'd be a lot of fun.
That sounds so amazing. So
yeah. Go ahead.
Go for it. If you have any final thoughts on that before I change subjects.
Yeah. One other cool idea for that would be to just different ways of making games and what happens in games more accessible. And the Starseed Observatory actually has built-in gameplay demos that are embedded into the website itself. So there'll be specific times where if they're talking about the controls of the game, right next to it, even though it looks like a screenshot, is actually a playable experience that you can mess around with in this tiny little box.
That's right.
So you take that same concept for local multiplayer games, and it'd be cool if somebody did a great play at a tournament, and of course, what if you had, your standard, you record that match, you put it on YouTube, you may or may not have commentary, that's great. But that doesn't really help a lesser skilled player or somebody who wasn't there really understand what happened in that moment. Mm-hmm. So by working with devs, it'd be neat to build a tiny little interactive experience that puts the reader in the same shoes as the player. And one, they could just see how hard it was to pull off that maneuver at that time.
God.
Or two,
brilliant.
They could just sort of see if they had their own skill set, if they would have been more likely to pull that off or less likely. And it's just a way of bridging experiences and people and putting them in a nice little context without necessarily having people go head to head and obsessing over like prize money and winners and all that. It's really all beside the point, I think.
I'm just imagining, like, I mean, this is just blowing my mind, but like we talk about curating games, we talk about curating critique, we talk about curating things, but like curating specific game moments in a fighting game so that you can actually like physically yourself analyze having your own Daigo moment.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Like you get to be a superstar for a moment, or even maneuver ways out of this. It reminds me of like an old Madden version where they had scenarios set up where you could play the end quarters of every single Super Bowl.
Oh, that's cool.
And they gave you like you either tried to accomplish what the winning team did or overtake as the losing team. And like something kind of like that, but on an even smaller scale in the competitive style. Sounds like A, ridiculous, and B, like way too cool.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll be able to pull off something like that very soon.
And even if there's anything on a smaller scale, just that idea of curating game moments is something I've never even thought about before.
Yeah, Douglas Wilson wrote a really cool article that popped up on Polygon about analyzing a Speedlunky run that was particularly notable. And I think he linked to a whole bunch of YouTube video clips, like as it was going along and explaining what happened. But the next step is obviously not clips, but playable little moments, so you can put yourself in the shoes of somebody who had everything on the line and see what it was like.
Oh yeah! Wow. Oh, that's so cool. So I want to I want to turn away from competitive scene and talk about what it's like being a teacher and being in classes for games, because I know that a lot of people that are listening in and a lot of people that may be watching something like this might be students, or they might be teachers, or they might be somewhere within some kind of education process and interested about games. So I want to know about what you've done for in teaching sectors and how you got into that side of things, as well as what you're like, how it works in that, the inner workings of of education, I guess, as a game studies person.
So my teaching experience is pretty limited. I do a little bit of consulting, and I know Noah Sasso, the original creator of Bar Volleyball, who came up with that concept. He works up and did some work with the NYU Game Center. So he has sort of more of the, you go to a classroom and talk to a bunch of hopeful game devs kind of perspective, and mine is more sort of on the ground level, talking with the devs and people about really specific nitpicky things about the game, and just applying a lot of the game's criticism kind of stuff that I do for an individual and really working with them.
That's even
I've
better.
done, yeah, I like it. I enjoy it. Hopefully I can do more with that in the future. But I taught a little bit with private lessons for violin, and in general did tutoring in school just to help people with writing, because my background, I have a degree in creative writing, and I use creative writing to get my foot in the door of understanding games and games criticism, and from there like game design, and just kept rolling from there. But my background is working a lot with essays and violin strings. But I make it work because in a lot of ways being a good critic teaches you how to listen and how to articulate what you're thinking and better understand other people's perspectives and what they're going through just by relating ideas and experiences. And the more you apply that to different fields, the more similar you see that whole process. So when I do consulting, or just when I have really focused design discussions with devs, I really like to zoom in on very specific things that I think would be important for illuminating these grander ideas, these more nebulous ideas that they haven't really put to words themselves, so they may not know is so important. And I think that's one of the most effective ways to quote unquote like help someone work through their own problems, because in a lot of ways you can't help people directly, you can't just fix their game, but engaging in this really sort of detail-oriented way is some of the best ways of just bringing to surface some of the things that they will then work through themselves.
Absolutely agreed. Teaching a man to fish, essentially.
Yeah. So, yeah, working with devs.
How does it work teaching devs then?
The coolest thing is that, so the whole Starseed Observatory thing is based around this new kind of criticism, and we call that gameplay critique, with periods in between game and play and critique. There's 2 periods in there.
Yeah.
And the idea is, in a lot of ways, this kind of criticism is very player-oriented, because we're not exclusively trying to speak to people who just like to write about games and our critics and our academics. We're not just trying to talk to devs and appeal to them. We're really trying to talk to the player base, because they represent the biggest group, and also because both critics and devs are players too. So you kind of get everyone in that swap. So players are the focus of this kind of criticism, and the best part about that is when you are working with somebody else, you start with being a player. I have some history of being a game tester in my background, so looking into games in a detailed way like that, being a player and then being the tester and then being the dev, you get all these cool angles on what it's like and how to approach a game, what it's like to make one and how to approach it. So like the first thing you do with any scenario where you're trying to help somebody out with their game or give them feedback is to play it, just be a player. And that's one of my favorite parts. Don't worry too much about what you're going to say. You don't worry too much about um, what you would change. You're just like, hey, I just get to play your game and then see what that's like and take it from there. I
There's
think there's
actually...
a lot.
Oh, go for it.
There's a lot more work, or there can be a lot more discipline in playing a game than I think most people think, because based on your attitude and the way you're looking at the game itself, you can approach it from all these different ways. Even when you're not even interested in being a critic, there's so many different ways to approach playing games that it helps to have some diversity and discipline in applying those different mindsets, even when you're a player. So it's not just all fun and games where you can just let loose and just be yourself and expect that to be of value to somebody else. Sometimes you go into a game and from the perspective of a new player, somebody who's not so familiar with the genre, you try to have as many perspective and lenses that you can switch in between it in order to provide the best feedback possible.
Wow, I'm just looking at, I'm rolling a clip of some Smash play, um, and I'm kind of putting all of these layers together in my head of the KirbyKid and all of those experiences, and it just seems like such a dive into ideas of discipline and following through with very concise projects. All entirely out of love. And so the opposite thing, the thing that I do is a lot of my work and critique in schools and even here on IndiE3 is very broad and looking at so many different things all at once and trying to fit in everything I can into a single space, whereas there's just so much focus here, whether it's Barabari Ball being like the super focused version of Smash, whether it's Starseed Observatory being a very focused and disciplined version of understanding game critique. And it's just, all of it is together so impressive and just cool and fun and inspiring. And I hope that other people are watching this and seeing like, you know what, you can do this too. This is, people can make these kinds of critiques as well on any kinds of games and go and be try to be an expert of a single game, and it's just so inspiring. Holy crap. That was just a great move.
Thanks for all that.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily where to go from there, but I'm just in awe. It's just such a different way of looking at game criticism in a time when usually it's all about the macro. How much can you put into a single spot, and can you put more than everyone else? And yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in what you said, you sort of highlighted this idea of doing things out of love, and sad reality is, based on the amount of work that I have put into some of these projects and the amount of the projects that I want to do, like I have a notebook filled with things that if I had the time, I'd be working on them right now and putting those into full production. But trying to figure out how to make money is important.
Yes.
And also how to, I guess more importantly, how to appeal, how to really communicate. It's like when you say appeal to people, it kind of sounds a little bit like marketing speak, or how to make things more accessible because we want their dollars. Like I really have a hard time packaging what I do and communicating what I do, and this idea that I just really want people to, as clearly as possible, say what they think, articulate their experiences, and then see what happens, right? And there's not a lot of money in that, at least not in the ways that I could figure out just with sheer passion for putting a project together. But yeah, that's just part of the challenge of doing anything, I think.
Oh yeah.
And
I can also offer my own experiences with that, as someone working in the university, especially a state school like the University of Washington, where there's not usually a lot of room for game studies, because there's not a lot of knowledge about what that means or what that entails or how that's useful or helpful for the industrial education complex. And so like the money isn't there. And so a lot
Yeah.
of these projects that you see in institutions, even at a college level, at a collegiate level, a lot of these institutions are just bare bones, or put together out of love is what we called it when we were working on it,
Yeah.
and for the love of students, of course, too. And so it's just hard to get platforms that and find where the money is, I guess, in a weird way of putting it, because like we want to be able to do these amazing projects consistently, and it's just hard when it's just hard to find the money for it, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of all the crazy ideas I can to sort of combine crowdsourcing with games criticism, or crowdfunding with great game criticism.
And
So,
crowdsourcing.
yeah, so if anything happens, I'll let you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're coming on to 8 p.m. James, I don't remember, did we start late this time, or?
Pretty much on time.
All right.
But we've been asked if we will have a little bit of time for questions
Yes,
from the viewers.
I would love to take extra time having KirbyKid here hanging out, if you don't mind, of course.
Yeah, I don't mind. Should I pull up the stream to see the questions, or is it gonna go crazy audio-wise?
You can pull it up and just mute it.
All right.
That way
I
it
can
won't
do
get
that.
picked up in your mic.
Thank you, James.
I figure this is our last panel for tonight, so we can run a little bit over, and then we will
And
do...
this is my last interview,
Yep.
and yeah,
So let's do it. Let's take some questions.
which is bizarre that that's a thing that exists. I'm still trying to digest that IndiE3 is a thing that I'm helping with. But what
I still haven't figured that out myself.
let's answer some questions.
Yeah, so I guess if you'll read the ones out loud, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability.
Okay, well, I'll read, because I've got the chat here, and I don't believe that Solon does at the moment.
I don't.
Okay, so I'll
Okay.
read. This question is from Bitzawolf, excuse me. Bitzawolf asks, for a game creator, how would it be best to create a playtest of your game for an audience that is not into developing and analyzing games? I want feedback from a lot of sources, but I do not want to scare my friends off with a big questionnaire after the game.
I think for playtesting, some of the most important things is just making sure that they, don't feel the eyes of the developers burning on the back of their neck. You just sort of give them as sort of distraction-free of an environment to test your game, play your game, and then watching them play may give you the most important feedback that they'll never articulate in words, right? Some people are good at talking about how they feel. Some people are good at remembering how they felt when they played and telling you what it's like. Other people require sort of a conversation environment, just to say, bounce ideas off, like, yeah, I remember that. I didn't like that, or yeah, I like that. It's different for everybody. Just not being upset that they're not giving you effective feedback verbally is very important. Just that's why watching them as they play can tell you everything you need. You watch their face, you watch where they grimace, you watch where they get stuck, and even though they get stuck and they may look upset, understanding that that's just a natural part of playing games, and they may not necessarily even reflect negatively on their experience. I guess if they allow it, you record not them playing necessarily, but if they have anything to say afterwards, you just kind of record that feedback, because even if you don't know how to pick up on all the things, or sort of interpret some of the things they say to give you the best advice for where to take your game next, other people can. Like, that's the cool part about taking the words that people say in their feedback. You can take this to somebody and say, hey, he said I don't like the balance here. What do I do with that? And then somebody looks at your game and says, don't worry about it. that little hitch that they had in the balance is going to disappear as soon as that player learns X, Y, and Z, which will come when Y happens, and they'll forget that ever happened. Like, stuff inside like that's important to be able to contextualize. So yeah, just take it easy.
That's kind of what I was thinking as well. Was
one piece of advice that I was given when I was having a conversation about this with Robert Boyd over at Boyd Games was that People will give you advice about your game. They will tell you what to do to fix it. Ignore all that. Look at the experience they had that prompted them to give that advice, and look at what actually caused that experience, and then go fix that. Because, if they had an unpleasant experience, then they did. That's their experience they had. But if you look at what caused it, you as the game creator are in a better position to find out what the solution will be.
Always remember that games are complicated, and talking about games is really hard. A lot of ways that people picked up to even get close to talking about games well is just telling you what to fix, and that's not a slide at you. It's not getting in your face. It's just super hard to even come close to talk about what you want, what you expected, what you wanted to happen. But sometimes it comes out, I hated that gun. You shouldn't have made it more powerful. And you're like, okay. Whatever.
We just, as people, are ill-equipped with the language to talk about being in virtual game spaces, and that's just a part of what it's like also being a game designer, a critic, a journalist. Why we rely so hard on this term gameplay to do so much heavy lifting for us, and so it's hard, especially if you're looking for the layman experience with your game as a tester. It's like you're just gonna have to rely on probably your best tools are recorded footage. Like, go grab a copy of OBS, Open Broadcaster software, and see if you can hook that up in a way that records people's expressions, people's concerted efforts, and in a way that's not intrusive. I liked the way that you put that, KirbyKid.
Good question.
Amazing question. Really well done. Oh, I had a extension on that question. If there are no others that we should get to, because your work is a lot in multiplayer games, and I could understand multiplayer gaming experiences being a little hard to find feedback about, because if people are playing the game together, their personal experiences are probably what is being voiced more than the game experience itself, at least from your perspective as the designer trying to look to make that experience better. So how do you go about looking at and critiquing multiplayer games specifically?
With multiplayer games, you need to have find some kind of consistent way to get people playing it and getting better at it, like playing it over and over with each other, with the expectation that they're having fun, but they're also continually get better at it. A lot of people have their play testers do that, but with Ball, it's just the three of us forever, and we brought the game to different tournaments and stuff to get fresh eyes on it. But for the most part, we had to make sure that we were playing the game at a sufficient level to see what was happening at those high levels. So you get the mix of both. You have at least a few people digging deep, and then you cross-compare that with the feedback you're getting from just how people are taking to the game in general, like for their first play session, for the second, and you just try to balance both out.
Mm-hmm. Were there any other questions in the chat?
Questions about Smash Brothers, games criticism, multiplayer games, Ball.
We're actually having a conversation about how to stream card games over the internet.
Ooh.
Because somebody has mentioned that they're testing a game of that nature, and I mentioned that I have friends who stream card games over the internet and play those that way. But that's not really directly related to this interview, I think.
No, it reminds me that just a week ago I streamed cribbage on Twitch, which was a riot. Is there anything else?
Networking and multiplayer games.
Yeah, if people want to just talk about Smash Bros, we'd be up for that.
For that one question about networking and multiplayer games, is that specifically asking about netcode and the design of online multiplayer games?
or about bringing people together, networking.
Yeah.
In that way.
Hopefully it's about that one, because that's the one I know about.
Could even just answer it for that.
Yeah. So
how do you get people together?
yeah, playing. It's always great to have an environment where people feel really comfortable just passing the controller to the next person, and it's not a big deal to just go ahead and give it a go and see what happens and have people laughing and having fun. You have to build that kind of environment with people, and you can't force people to do that. So one of the cool things you can do is have a small group of your friends, and when you invite other people in, usually they sit on the outside, they observe, and then they get a little bit more comfortable with, oh, everybody's having fun. If people look like they're mad, they're not really mad, like that's cool. And then at some point you hand them the controller and they fit right in, and it's just not a big deal if they win or lose or whatever, like have everyone having fun. So I don't think there's a way you broadcast that just in words. You don't tell people, hey, it's a cool place to play games. You just show them, you invite them, and you make the tour into that experience as painless as possible.
Mm-hmm. Once you get them in the door, that's the hard part.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you just have to, shake hands and trade some names.
Yeah, and it's also cool to have somebody show them stuff. No one likes that guy or that girl who just sits there with knowing how to play the game really well, and then you ask them a question, how did you do that? They go, figure it out. You're like, okay, I can either sit here and lose for the next 10 hours, go home, look it up on YouTube, or you can tell me now I could still have trouble pulling it off, and everybody has fun that way. So yeah, stuff like that. That's classic stuff though. Kids do that kind of stuff.
So if you're not building your own though, is there any infrastructure for finding local multiplayer spots?
There's in New York, which I don't live. I live in Texas, but they have local meetups, and the NYU Game Center puts on events, and those are great opportunities for people to come get eyeballs on your game, share stuff, and they seem to do really well with that. I think it depends on the area. Like down here in the Dallas area, I wouldn't know what to do to find like people like that, or just a general environment where people would hang out and do that. Because volleyball's a fighting game, if there's a tournament, we can bring that along, and we just fit right into that environment, set up a controllers, and people already understand how to go at that. So
especially since it's kind of just a one button game. Two buttons, excuse me, but the simplicity of it is very easy to grasp when you're in a fighting game area.
You are making. I'm going to take a chance to advertise my own event. I'm one of the organizers of the monthly Battle for Seattle fighting game tournament series. You're making me want to run Barabari Ball there and see what happens. So if you're around Seattle, come to that.
I mean, there's got to be just like a hashtag for like FGC meetups or something.
Well, for FGC especially, each individual game ends up having its own kind of community online web forum, which usually have some place to find local meetups, especially because fighting games are so local multiplayer dependent. Netcode is not generally acceptable for high-level play.
Yeah.
Which was also always the exclusion of Melee and the Smash scene, because the online play was even worse than netcode, or non-existent entirely.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I'm used to driving around places to get these experience, but I know that's not the norm. Fighting game, there's cool regular tournaments, regular meetups for fighting games, depending on how sort of densely urban your region is. New York has a lot of events that they stream every Tuesday, break weeklies and stuff like that. And I think at those events, I've seen them play Needhog and share side events. And I think side events are a great way to to expand sort of diversify the content that they show and just get people playing games that they otherwise wouldn't, but in a really cool environment. But that's if you're a multiplayer game, and more specifically, if you're similar to a fighting game, that kind of is a good avenue for you. See, that's kind of the hurdles we were talking about before. Like, where are places where people just get together and play a range of different multiplayer games locally? Usually they rely on internet play, and they go into their very niche or specialized genres to play around. They may hop genres, but they don't. I mean, they may stay within the same genre, but they don't hop around. That's rough.
Need some kind of just like decathlon event. Get all of these indie or even just general multiplayer games together and just put them all together in one space and have people.
You're stumbling onto my secret. I can't talk about that.
Oh no! I don't want to step on toes.
Cool. So there's another question from Bitsawolf.
Yes, we have one more. Bitsawolf asks, I have a question about competitive games like Smash. I've been into Dota 2 lately, but I'm also very interested in educating people. How do you help bridge that gap between such complex games, but let people have fun and learn?
You have an answer? I've got answers too. That's a great question.
It is.
I think a lot of games are complex, and for a lot of games, we talk about skill floors and skill ceilings and barriers to entries, and some games you have to do quite a lot to just get the basics going, and that's why people typically, use tutorials on those games, or when people say to get into it, they're like, learn this first, and they sort of take it upon themselves to tell you what you need to do to get your foot in the door. And for those games, it's hard, but learning in general is hard. It always helps to have a buddy. It always helps to have someone showing you the ropes and working with you at your level. And that's going to be true for anything, any kind of learning ever. So for games like Dota 2, that's what I would recommend. I'm not sure, like I don't play the game, so I can't get more specific about that. But how I've eased people into Smash is just sort of jumping around on different platforms and having them follow me around, and then taking out computers together and giving them really simple things to look for. And I'm going to set you up. You're going to forward smash this guy, okay? Here it comes. And then talking through certain things. And pretty much you have to become teacher. Right? There's no really substitute for a good teacher.
And well, you can also go. I think a lot of people go by way of trying to like set themselves up as a rival or something. But I like your contextualization where it's like, all right, you and me against the computers. And so it's not a competitive teaching relationship, teaching by attacking. It's teaching by assimilation, like having a shared goal and stuff.
Yeah.
I guess my answer, I don't know if the question was to be taught a game or if it was to teach a game. But either way, I would go towards a multimedia approach. When it comes to teaching a game, people learn really, really well by graphical interpretations and abstractions, and like being able to see the hitboxes and understand the language of what it means to interact with a hitbox in a fighting game, or any other games with that kind of object relationship. Being able to like show, I mean, like if I was doing Barabari Ball and trying to show off some intense stuff, it would probably involve some screenshots with arcs and angles and things mapped out in a elegant way that shows what is going to happen, or even GIFs. GIFs have been extremely helpful for teaching mechanics or teaching how things work in those scenes. So like a multimedia approach, I guess, is a great way to teach people how to play games. There's just a lot of graphical ways to explore what thing is actually happening in like a small unit of play in a single instant. That is hard. That might be hard to execute, right? But you can show it.
Yeah, definitely. Just doing blogging on my own personal blog, criticalgaming.com, where there's a hyphen in between critical and gaming. Just trying to find a whole bunch of different ways to explain what happens in games via images and video and sound. And I do a lot with drawing lines on screenshots and diagrams, and then editing the photos so you only look at certain things, and trying to give you an idea of what I'm thinking as I'm playing. And that can also help just explaining what my mindset is going into certain strategies. There's other approaches I've taken. Even on the Starseed Observatory, there's that one article that takes every single scenario we could think of and explains what the high-level player would do with that seed in that scenario. So if you're trying to go up, this is how you would use red, and this is the things you're looking out for when you have a red and whatever other seeds are coming up. If you're trying to go horizontal, you should probably do this and this and avoid this. And just sort of talking it out helps too. Just giving people a sense that, oh, he's thinking through what he's doing, and it's not just guesswork. It's not just random. He's not just getting lucky. It's a sentence that I can understand. That helps.
I have your website up, and I just noticed this part about the About site that's really perfect, and what I was thinking. At the very bottom, it says the word language, and when it comes to teaching people how to do anything or understand a concept, giving them language is the ultimate step in fostering education.
Yeah, I'm big on that.
It's huge in the fighting game community, especially.
Absolutely. Fighting games have a very, very specialized vernacular for dealing with all of the concepts and timings and mind games. Yeah, that's a good one. I've also got some noise there. I also like a lot of the work that Tim Rogers has been doing with a lot of his language he's been inventing to deal with some of the concepts that he finds very intuitive, but that have not actually had a lot of words applied to them. That's been really interesting, talking about his friction concepts and so on.
Yeah, you'd be amazed at how much the right word, right time can make a world of difference in giving someone the ability to communicate, taking away stress and everything. Like, imagine all these concepts swirling around your head, and you're just imagining, yeah, when I did this in the game, this happened. When this happened, I don't know, I tried to do this, and that's like a whole narrative that you're trying to keep straight. Then somebody walks up and just says, you should have used a frame trap. And you're like, wait a minute, what? Like, yeah, if you delay your attack just slightly, they'll probably fall for it, and you'll hit them. It works like magic. And then all of a sudden, all those thoughts in your head just collapse into, this is your frame trap. I should use a frame trap. And the next time you're in that scenario, the words are just so liberating. You're like, oh, concepts, techniques, strategies. I can almost talk myself through things in my head to understand it instead of just sitting here getting overstressed.
Yep, frame trap, safe jump. These are important concepts, you know? Like they distill a complex situation down to one word, and then gives you the mental tools to recognize and respond to that situation. It's really fascinating.
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Well, if you learn the language, you will.
Yeah.
I can be fighting game too?
You can use a frame trap to understand what we're talking about. I'm sure that'll work.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's exactly, yeah. Then the extension of that is that once you understand a frame trap, you can watch out for it, and then you have an even more meta discussion with any opponents that you have, because they would also know frame traps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The layers of Yomi are reading of what your opponent's intentions are and what his actions and what their action is.
And that's one of the cool features we worked hard on the observatory is a glossary, right? People have terms all the time. There are a few dictionaries and glossaries out there. The one thing we wanted to do was make it interactive and at least visual. So we have images next to everything we talk about. So even if you knew what you were looking for, but you don't know the words, you can just scroll down until you see it, and you're like, that's it. That's what it was. The word and the image should go together. Stuff like that. Just little things like that I think go a long way. Trying to create a community where people can actually explain and share things rather than just get frustrated at their lack of the ability to communicate. Yeah, Yomi is just a Japanese word for reading in general, but they apply it to reading the opponent's mind. At least we do.
It holds pretty true. I mean, we say that in English too. He got the read on the opponent, or what have you.
Any more questions?
I don't know. I feel like we're about tapped out for this one for
Alright.
tonight.
Well, in that case, I just want to thank you so much, KirbyKid, for being on and hanging out with us today. It's been just fun talk.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for having me.
I think that we've really went a whole lot of different places in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. So is the whole IndiE3 coming to a close?
Well,
That the
today is the last day
today.
of broad content. Tomorrow we are hosting just revealing all of the Game Jam games, and then we'll see from there. But six whole days of content, and on the seventh day we'll actually get to play some games.
So
We
rest
have
and play games.
We have a few more things up our sleeves, but we'll talk about those when they actually come to be.
Yes, yeah. Always scheming.
I've been watching my email very closely today. I will say that.
Where should we be able to get in contact with you, Richard, and find all of your stuff?
Yeah, just easiest way to get to me is KirbyKid on Twitter. And on that Twitter description, I have my blog, and there's this link to the Sarsi Observatory and bar volleyball stuff. It's easily linked on either of those. So, yeah, my Twitter is the best place to find me. I'm always there.
Anything else that we should be looking out for in the future?
I'll hopefully launch another website-like thing or make an announcement about it pretty soon, and that should kickstart. That should kickstart what will happen over the next 6 months or so. So let's hope that all goes well.
Oh, exciting! So yeah, go follow KirbyKid at KirbyKid for more information and stuff on that. That sounds so exciting. Thank you for being a part of IndiE3, and thank you for being here. It means so much to me.
It's great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you for coming. It's been a blast. On that note, I think we're going to take a very short intermission while we get ready for the final round
The last one
of Indie Showcase.
Yep.
So everybody, please look forward to that, and we'll be back in, say, about 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll take it from there. Thank you, everybody.